Hello, my name's Heidi and I'm going to be showing you how to draw this archway. So before I even started recording, you can see that I've made some lines on the paper. I made an outline of where I want the drawing to actually be, and then I made a vertical line and a horizontal line. What this is to make it a little bit easier on myself, I'm making a 1:1 scale drawing of the picture that I printed out. Basically, I just measured the dimensions of the picture and then I drew those dimensions onto the page. That just makes it easier for when I'm measuring things out, which you'll see me do with my pencils, and it'll just make it easier so I can match things up a little bit better. And then the lines that I drew, the horizontal lines, are so that I can see the middle of the drawing, and that again just kind of helps with scaling so that I can see how far from those lines everything is, and how far from like the middle of the drawing everything is. Just a few things to make it easier on myself. This whole drawing, I'm just using my 5H pencil. The reason for this is because it is a contour line drawing, which just means that it is that line for the drawing before I put more detail into it. This is one way of creating a drawing, not the only way, of course, but for drawings with a lot of lines, a lot of details, I like to do them this way. It just helps because then I can get the details all mapped out without having to worry while I'm doing the volume, which will be in the next video. So this video is just contour lines and showing you how I get all those lines laid out. You've already seen that I've done some measuring with my pencil so that I can see the lengths, comparing the length of what I've drawn to the length of what's in the picture. And I'm also comparing angles. So when I did that, the angle that goes from the door over to the side of the picture, you can see that I kind of compared and made sure that it matches up and is at the same degree of angle, which is probably, if you're looking at a clock, at the 9 o'clock, it's straight across, and so it's just a little bit below that, so somewhere between the 9 and the 8. And then again with the detail over here with the kind of rectangular spot, I was just comparing the angles just to make sure that everything matches up well. This is a very tricky painting, or drawing. So if you're trying to follow along, it's tricky with all the different lines, not necessarily for beginners, but if you follow along what I'm doing, it kind of shows you how I'm doing everything. And sometimes it is just a guess and a check. Since I am doing a 1:1 scale, I could measure it out and put a whole bunch of points down first, but I usually kind of like to try to eyeball it first with something. With this, obviously here, I'm measuring it, measuring this wall to make sure that I get it right. But with some things, I'll kind of, I'll guess it first and then I'll get it wrong and I'll redo it. Like what I'm doing here, I'll end up redoing that too because it's not exactly right. But that's kind of how it goes sometimes with drawing. Just depends on your style. Something else that we're seeing a bit in this drawing is we're having to use some perspective. What that means is that some of the lines that would normally, like if you're looking at them straight on, they would maybe be flat across, but because there's depth and dimension, they'll be kind of more diagonal. And that can be tricky sometimes, which is why I like to measure with my pencil to make sure that I'm getting those lines right. Because sometimes you think that something, because in real life you know that it's maybe longer or taller than it really is, your brain exaggerates it and you think that it's different from what it appears to be in the image. And so it's always good to use your pencils to measure things, to measure how far things are from each other. Even so, I mean, this drawing isn't exactly how it is in the picture, but I think that's okay, because otherwise what's the point of making a drawing if you're going to make it exactly the same? Like, I think it's okay for some things to be different, because then it makes it a little bit more unique from the actual photo. For me, one of the trickiest parts of this drawing was the bridge railing here, the brick railing. Again, because of that perspective, and because it's just kind of a strange, it's not just a normal railing, it's a little bit more unique and stylized, so it made it a little bit more difficult than if it were just a plain railing. And so I started kind of on the smaller end, started the railing there, and then you'll see I'll get to a point and I'll start doing it on the other end too. This is to make sure that sometimes it's hard if you're focused in too much, or if you start at the bigger end too and you don't pay enough detail to the smaller end. It's easy to kind of get off track with it, and so I like to start at one end and then the other and then kind of meet in the middle. It's also a little bit, I started doing the bigger end too because I was having a hard time understanding just how this structure worked, like how everything was set up, and so working with the bigger end kind of helped me see. I wouldn't have to squint at the little tiny details, helped me understand how these railings worked in their little tiered way. So I'm doing some of the little details here. They are small in the image, so it's not too important that you get everything exactly right. More so that you just kind of make them look like trees. Usually I do kind of little squiggly lines and such. And then I'll put some of those rocks in there in the mountains. And it's not exactly how it is in the original, but I think that it still works. I kind of like the mountains a little bit bigger. And then I'm just erasing some of those marks that I was using to keep track of where everything was. So that's going to conclude this drawing. I hope that you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for the next one, where I take the same drawing, but I just put a little bit more detail into it by doing some highlighting and shading and just give volume to the whole image.